And first thing I want to say right up front before we dive into the next session, a couple things. One is I was reminded of something I heard Dr. Carl Lehman talk about years ago. He said doing the deep emotional healing prior to knowing about the Emmanuel process was like doing root canals without Novocaine. And I just had a root canal this week, and I got to tell you, I was really thankful for the Novocaine. Not so thankful for the initial shot, but definitely thankful for the Novocaine. And I kind of wonder if I may have taken you through the last session as a root canal without Novocaine. And I apologize that I didn't get you connected to Jesus first, because I do think that that is critical, because these are really hard things to look at. So I don't have the slide up for it, but I want us to start this session, first of all, with appreciation and trying to get connected with Jesus. So let me pray for us. So Father, we come to you this afternoon, and we just thank you for being a loving, engaged Father. As we talked about this morning, Lord, a Father who comforts us better than the best earthly mother. And Lord, I know there's a lot of hurting going on in the room right now. And I pray that it's the healing kind of hurting, the kind of hurting that happens when the abscess is open up and the infection starts draining out. But Lord, I just pray that each person here will have a sense of your Emmanuel presence with them as we work through hard material. And so, Lord, I just pray right now that you just help everyone to take a couple deep breaths with me as we transition back into this sacred space. So please breathe with me. Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. So now, Jesus, I just ask that you would remind each one of us of a place of strong, clear connection with you. Maybe it's a place of appreciation that we've gone to somewhere in the last 2 days. Maybe it's a new place. I just ask that you would remind each one of us of a place in our mind we can go to where we get a sense, a glimpse, the strongest glimpse we can get of your Emmanuel, God with us presence that helps us know that we're safe in your arms. So just invite him personally. Jesus, please remind me of something I can appreciate. Right? Whatever he's reminded you of, give it a name, and then find a way to put that as a peg on a wall someplace. Some people find it's helpful to use an index finger and just tap the name on their thumb or their shoulder or their cheek. Some people, it's fine just to put that on a peg on a wall and know it's a safe place they can go to. So Jesus, I just ask that you help each person to put an anchor of appreciation someplace so that if things get hard, they can go back to their anchor of appreciation and hold on and find more of the healing that you have for them. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. But all right, well, let's jump back into the assessment questions. So page 24 of your workbook, just as you did on the anxious attachment, just make tally marks as we go through these questions. Again, go with your initial thought. Don't try to analyze it. If you think you want to say yes, put a mark down, all right? Okay? Do you find yourself yearning for people who feel unavailable to you? Do you sometimes apologize for things you haven't done simply because you fear upsetting or losing the other person? Do you lose yourself or become merged in relationships? Are you over-focused on others, under-focused on yourself? Does your partner sometimes describe you as needy or clingy? Is it difficult to say no to others? In other words, do you have trouble maintaining healthy boundaries? Do you often second-guess yourself or lack confidence in your words or actions? Do you feel like you typically give more than you receive in relationships? If so, do you often end up feeling resentful toward the other person, even to the point of holding a grudge? When a partner expresses love and appreciation, is it difficult for you to recognize and deeply feel their caring behaviors? Is it difficult for you to be alone? When you are alone, do you regularly feel abandoned, stressed out, hurt, or angry? Do you yearn for connection yet feel afraid of losing whatever relationship you're in? After a time away from your partner, say after a vacation or a business trip, do you regularly feel upset or pick fights with your partner? Do you feel you can easily attune to others' feelings, wants, and needs? Do you feel you need others to calm you down? And do you find it difficult to self-soothe? Do you often find yourself living in the past, not able to forgive or forget old injuries? Do you find yourself complaining a lot and overlooking or dismissing caring behaviors from your loved ones? Okay. Now total your yes answers here, and then compare them to your yes answers on dismissive attachment. My hunch is everybody has some yeses in both styles. Part of that is because what I love, like I said, Diane Poole Heller describes them as attachment adaptations. So even dismissives will use some anxious adaptations and vice versa. But if you compare your totals on both sheets, it should give you a pretty good feel, if you didn't already have it already, where you tend to lean more towards. And again, probably haven't made this clear enough, but let me just repeat again and again. There is a lot of overlap. And we often use different adaptations in different relationships or even different contexts or different levels of stress that we feel. Okay? And the higher the stress, then the less secure attachment we're typically able to hold on to. And so that may help you understand this a little bit more. It's pretty common and then again, especially in the context of disorganized attachment, you may have a high number of both. Okay? Because that's what disorganized does, is it had to adapt because think about it this way, your environment was so chaotic and so difficult, you had to learn multiple styles of adaptation in order to survive in the difficult place that you were in. Okay? And my apologies to anyone who knows that they have disorganized attachment. We do not have the ability in this context to really go deeply into that. One, because of how much of it is deep trauma based. And two, just from a time perspective. I mean, we're going to have trouble getting through with what I have today. And we probably won't. And crazy me was worried going into this that I wouldn't have enough content. But anyway, so let's move on with anxious attachment, all right? An anxious attachment, also called ambivalent or in the life model circles, distracted attachment, is an insecure style of relating where a child received some joyful connection, but not the consistent, reliable, and healthy rhythm of joy and quiet that he needed to establish secure attachment. But because the child gets some connection, he learns how good it feels when his attachment lights come on and mom, dad, or somebody else turns theirs on and they connect with him and they get to go on that dopamine ride and it feels great. Here's a quote from Diane Poolheller. She says, "Children with inconsistent parenting can become, therefore, overly focused on others, especially their primary caregiver, because they live with a fear that the world of relationships is shaky and erratic. It makes sense that these children would want to maintain constant contact and display behavior we typically associate with a particularly negative connotation with clinginess. Because when I do get it, it's wonderful. And so therefore I'm chasing it all the time. And therefore I don't want to let mom out of my sight. And therefore when I transfer my primary attachment from my mom to my wife, I don't want to let her out of my sight." See how it works? However, in this dynamic, connection is not synchronized with the child. The connection is when it feels good to the adult. You know, they've come home from work, they're tired, I can't connect right now. After they chill for a bit, okay, I'm ready to connect, but now the child is off playing somewhere else. And they, instead of synchronizing the child, joining them in their play, they drag the child back and says, "Do it my way." All right? It's about the parent's need, and therefore from the child's perspective, inconsistent and or undependable. And as a result, the child learns connection is like water in a desert, which must be sought after and taken wherever, whenever, however it's available. Even if it's muddy and yucky and gross, it's water, and I gotta get it right now. Therefore, he develops a relational style where his attachment lights are always on. After all, he thinks, I can't miss any opportunity to connect. And while the pain of having his attachment lights on and no one connect to him is great, the fear of missing a connection is even greater than the pain of not being connected. So they keep trying. And as you can imagine, or many of us relate to, this leads to a painful identity that is highly needy and always looking to attach to receive comfort from distress from others. And it can be typified in the expression, "Come here, come here." Those with anxious attachments generally have high affect and will often use high drama. They are often stuck in high arousal states of response to people and relationships. And when they are afraid or insecure, they want to be close and use connection as a coping strategy. They are frequently in crisis and often use neediness or distress to manipulate others for attention. In relationships, they are the initiators and the pursuers. Whenever there is conflict, they feel a tremendous burden to repair and reconnect, even if it requires accepting blame or consequences they don't believe are legitimate. They think, I'd rather take the fall than remain separated and alone. Unfortunately, an anxious, desperate need for connection often sabotages the very connection they deeply desire, as they often end up overwhelming others. They may take the blame for an argument or even apologize out of their need for connection, even though they don't believe they've done anything wrong. This is dishonest, manipulative, and often prevents the other person from feeling the rupture and taking responsibility for their actions. It also often leads to resentment as they are hurt that once again, I've taken the fall. This resentment further leads to demands for more and/or deeper connection. This, especially to a dismissive, often feels smothering and brings a reactionary response of "go away," which in turn sends the anxious in a tailspin, further accentuating the downward spiral. The end result is great pain. Diane Poole Heller says it this way. She says, "Unfortunately, our attempts to stabilize personal connections in these ways, hypersensitivity, jealousy, and overstatement, often result in what we fear most. We can unintentionally push people away, which reinforces our fundamental belief that others are just waiting to abandon us. Furthermore, when our own anxiety plays such a major role in our relationships, it can undermine trust and prevent deep connection and growth. And it therefore leads to living a life in a chronic fear of abandonment." And yet, while in the terror of abandonment, we often sabotage ourselves and actually push others toward abandoning us. Poole Heller again says this, "Our hunger for closeness is matched only by the fear of abandonment that comes up when we achieve the closeness we've been looking for. As a result, some of us become quite expert at deflecting or minimizing our partner's attempts to show their love for us. Or we find ways to create disconnection and distance, arguing, acting defensively, or treating our partners with jealousy and suspicion." You see the traps here? We desperately want connection, but we're so terrified of rejection that even in times of connection, we often push back and run away. Okay? In the extreme cases, that goes into disorganized. But it's in that place of I'm expecting, anticipating rejection, so my VLE, my verbal logical explainer, grabs a hold of any hint of rejection, anything that can be interpreted as rejection, and says, "Yep, there it is, there it goes again, it always goes badly for me," and we continue to spiral. So now let's get real pointed again and ask, how does this play out in the active stages of DST? How does this play out for the husband during the time when his wife is either unaware or only partially aware of his secret sexual basement? Well, it comes out in a number of ways, and I'm only going to scratch the surface here. First of all, it comes out that he often places overwhelming expectation on his wife's availability, responsiveness, etc. And because of that, and part of closely connected to that, he can't be okay unless he believes that she is okay with him. Again, the anxious looks to the responses of another to give them their sense of security. So if I think you're upset with me, then I can't be secure. Okay, we all struggle when we know somebody's upset with us, but an anxious struggles at a higher level. Okay? An anxious is also, they're focused so much on others that he loses connection with himself. And he also often overinterprets rejections and then uses being rejected as justification for acting out. Okay, you see how these build on each other? Especially when you've got a secret basement, you've got your IMR going, then, okay, well, I'll move towards my wife, and when she rejects me, well, then I feel justified. I tried, I'm trying to make connection, she don't want to connect with me, so entitlement creeps in. And the process continues. Okay? They also often struggle with feeling intense rejection and abandonment. And all of these times of abandonment, whether they are real or perceived, guess what has been his coping mechanism since childhood for dealing with pain and anxiety? An anxious often struggles with justifying on the basis of needs not being met, or not being met in the exact specific ways that they have pictured, imagined, or created in their own minds. Anxious are especially vulnerable, or it's especially common for them to have very set expectations, and when those expectations aren't met, then it's like nothing has been met. They are especially vulnerable to the entitlement of, my wife doesn't want to be close to me, and that could be emotionally, it could be physically, it could be sexually, it could be just the fact that, she went to her parents for the weekend because they were having a big family event. And the anxious says, my wife doesn't want to be with me, so therefore I deserve a sexual entitlement. And then, whereas a dismissive often more predominantly uses the solo sex, a anxious is more likely to use what Sue Johnson calls solace sex. Johnson's term for solo sex is sealed off sex. I think they're synonyms in some ways, and they both convey some slightly different elements that are helpful there. But solace sex is a little more connected than sealed off or solo sex, but its purpose is still not what God's designed is. Okay? Because they will use solace sex as the barometer of the relationship. If we're having sex, then everything's wonderful. And if we're not having sex, then she hates me, the world's horrible, and I might as well go find somebody who loves me because she obviously doesn't love me. Okay? So again, Sue Johnson's 3 types of sex: the sealed off sex, solace sex, and synchrony sex. And for the anxious, they tend to go to solace sex, and here's her definition. Solace sex occurs when we are seeking reassurance that we are valued and desired. The sex act is just a tag-along. The goal is to alleviate our attachment fears. There is more emotional involvement than sealed off sex, but the main emotion directing the sexual dance is anxiety. Let me repeat that last line. The main emotion directing the sexual dance is anxiety. And again, for most men, they learn this coping mechanism 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And it has sustained them. It has, as we often talk about, I have my guys write a goodbye letter to their old best friend. You say, well, that wasn't a best friend. Well, not all best friends are good friends. Okay? But guess what this best friend was? Reliable, dependable, always available. And so the energy behind solace sex is that place of, I can't be okay unless I know that she thinks we're okay, or unless I know that she's okay with me. So if she'll have sex with me, then I know that she believes I'm okay. And so it becomes a pressure situation. It becomes the very common place for couples where the husband is constantly pursuing and the wife says, all you ever want from me is sex. No, it's usually not that that's all he wants. That's the only way he has learned at that stage to receive the communication, I delight in you, I care for you, I value you. And as you can imagine, or many of you may have experienced, this solace sex creates a tremendous painful pressure on the relationship. And in the context of a secret sexual basement, it's certainly magnified. Because the wife is, smelling fumes, sensing something isn't right. So guess what happens to her libido? It's diminishing. And then when they do connect sexually, it's maybe not satisfying because for him it's about not connecting, not being emotional and relational. It's about dealing with his anxiety. And so as the wife begins to pull away sexually, physically, because the relationship doesn't feel good, it's not healthy, something's not right, where does that send the husband in a spiral? And then he's putting more pressure, and more pressure leads to more resistance. And it becomes a very painful place. And where have most men learned to deal with their pain since early childhood? Sexual fantasy, masturbation, pornography. Guess what? They never say no. And they always provide a counterfeit joy. Okay? The picture here might help you understand this too. I don't remember where I read this, but I heard years ago that someone did an experiment with hummingbirds where they put out hummingbird feeders with sugar water, got the hummingbirds used to them, and then they replaced the sugar water with artificially sweetened water that had 0 calories. Well, guess what the hummingbirds did? They kept coming back, kept coming back, kept coming back until they started dying of malnutrition. Why? Because the artificial sweeteners were tricking their brains to think they were getting nourishment when really all they were getting was 0-calorie waters. That's pornography. That's solosexual behaviors. That's sexual fantasy. There is no joy sustenance to it. But it keeps people on the gerbil wheel of, I got to come back, I got to get more, I got to do this, until it crushes them. And unfortunately, it does great harm to wives when this is part of the cycle. When the husband brings this solace sex, which is a step above the sealed off sex, and but the damage that it can do and the pressure it puts on the relationship is huge. It's also helpful to notice that sexual acting out is centered around the fantasy of being wanted and or calming this fear of abandonment. Okay? And that's what drives the solace sex, but now it drives sexual acting out. So it's a pain relieving medication. Pornography, masturbation, Anxious are much more inclined to have love addiction traits. It's not the sex, it's the somebody wants me, somebody delights in me, somebody cares for me. Now, dismissives can have that as well, but it's more prominent among anxious. They're also more susceptible to emotional affairs because they're looking for connection. And they're not afraid of connection like a dismissive is. They're also more inclined to have ongoing sexual affairs. Prostitution use, again, is similar use to dismissives, but with a different purpose. I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling concerned, so I will find a sexual partner, even if I have to pay for a sexual partner, in order to calm my anxiety. In the marriage relationship, it often leads to the husband sexually pressuring the wife. And yes, I purposely put this in the category of sexual acting out behavior. Because for an anxious, I highly recommend that the anxious take the request of sexual engagement off the table for a while, because of the likelihood of the pressure that has been done by the solace sex in the past. Okay? But oftentimes in the marriage, when the secret sexual basement is going full blow, that one of the outgrowths of that is the husband then lives in this sexually charged environment, and then he just takes that to his wife and in essence says, I want you to keep up, or I want you to make me okay, or I want you to make me okay, and then maybe I won't spend as much time in the basement. And so there's this pressure that takes place. And many wives feel the pressure that, well, I'm afraid if I don't have sex with him, then he's going to be angry and the house is going to be disruptive and he might go act out, etc., etc. And all this is happening when the wife still doesn't know much or anything about what's happening in the basement. It can take another step beyond sexually pressuring wife. It can move on into coercive sex. Debbie coined a phrase years ago that I think is quite poignant. And the phrase she came up with was coercive sex. And coercive sex probably can be best summed up by a phrase my wife said a number of years ago. And that was, she said, consensually against my will. And what she was talking about there is the preponderance of times that wives will give in to the badgering and say yes, but their whole being is saying no. Sheila Gregor, in her Great Sex Rescue, talks about the commonality, especially in Christian marriages, of vaginismus and vaginal pain in sexual intercourse. And one of the things she points to there is the pressure that many Christian women feel and have been wrongly put on them by the male-dominated Christian world and books and materials on the subjects that says, wives, you have to make him okay or he's going to go find it somewhere else. And so they're not in a place, their body's not responding, they don't really want to, but they feel like they have to, and so they give in. And guys, we have to recognize that's coercive. It's wrong. And that many times then it goes to an even darker place of marital rape. And I know this is a really difficult subject, but it needs to be spoken, I think, very clearly. Anytime there is not a clear yes, it's against her will. Consent is a fundamental place, even in marriage. And the misogyny and the male-dominated culture that sometimes wants to say there can't be marriage and there can't be rape in marriage, that is just wrong. And I believe God's calling us to speak out against that. And if that has been a part of any of your stories here, know that you're not alone and that there is help for both of you. That as the husband and the abuser and the perpetrator, that yes, there is a place of forgiveness, there's a place of healing, but part of where that place is absolutely essential in is that place of confession and ownership and getting it out in the light. And ladies, if that's been your experience, I just plead with you to find the help that you need to heal from the trauma that has been inflicted on you. Because the most basic boundary that we have is our skin and our human body. And everyone always has the right to say no. And the misusing of the passage about the wife's body not being her own, I don't have time to go into that. But my teaching from 15 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago now, on sexual methadone, if you've not watched that and this is striking a nerve for you, send me an email. I'll send you a link to it. I don't know if it's... Anyway, I will gladly share that with anybody. But marital rape is still rape. And it's very wrong. But it can be healed. Now let's talk and transition now. What happens with anxious attachment in recovery? Again, by in recovery, I'm talking about some sobriety, good progress moving, in good support, making headway, etc. So what does it look like in recovery when there is some sobriety and movement towards healthier places? Okay? A husband often places overwhelming expectations on a wife's ability, responsiveness, etc. Okay, again, that solace sex pressure we were talking about, that doesn't just go away. It's still there. He often continues to struggle to be okay unless he believes she's okay with him. That continues into recovery until it's addressed. And especially when the early focus of recovery is just on sobriety, then that's not even aware that that's a problem many times. As I mentioned before, he often continues to struggle using solace sex as the barometer of the relationship. Okay? Unfortunately, many times this struggle actually increases. Okay? Where the stupidity of sexual methadone title came from was actually a reaction to the Every Man's Battle book that has a page in it that is for the wives. And it says to the wives, once your husband decides to go cold turkey, i.e. stop looking at pornography and taking in sexual imagery from others in the world and solely focuses on you, be a merciful vial of methadone for him. I read that early in recovery in two night and day different ways. One, the addict in me said, hooray, somebody's on my side. And the really good part of me said, that is horrific. And it's horrific both for the wife and the husband. It's horrific for the wife because, she's just expected, and he goes on to even say that, I know he may have told you some really hard things for you to process, but do this for him anyway. It's like complete obliviousness to the fact that she just got run over by a freight train. Why don't you just scrape yourself off the tracks, wipe the blood off your forehead and go have sex with him and then he'll be okay. It's ridiculous. Okay? And unfortunately, this solace sex as a barometer of the sexual relationship can often get more pronounced in early recovery because the principle that the Every Man's Battle book was talking about, there is a principle there that's real. And that is that many men use pornography, masturbation, other sexual acting out forms, especially the anxious attached, so that they don't pressure their wife as much because they know that she can't handle that kind of pressure. And so when they cut off those other sources, guess what happens to that pressure? Then it all gets funneled on her. And I'm afraid that many men have done more harm through solace sex in their early recovery than they did to her through the IMR and other things prior to coming clean. And that's why it has to be addressed, especially on an attachment basis level. Okay? An anxiously attached and early in recovery is often extra sensitive to signs of rejection and often overinterprets rejections. This leads to struggles with emotional regulations and sometimes relapse. I feel rejected. What do I do with the pain of feeling rejected? I reach for my most trusted medicine. A man in early recovery, with an anxious attachment, must learn to be okay even when she is not. One of the hardest things to do in recovery is to break free from that place of, how can I be okay if my wife's not okay with me? And you got to understand, dismissively attached individuals struggle with that as well. But it is ramped up even higher for those with anxious attachments. Okay? Anxiously attached individuals may have a more difficult time establishing and maintaining their sobriety because sex has been their primary way of managing anxiety since childhood. Okay, let me try to flesh that out just a little bit. I think that's a point I just added that's not in your notebook. But many have a more difficult time establishing and maintaining sobriety because sex has been their primary way of managing anxiety since childhood. And so now that we've passed discovery, maybe we're past disclosure, wife is hurt, she's upset, she's withdrawn, what happens to his anxiety level? It's through the roof. Did he suddenly develop really good anxiety managing skills? No. Hopefully he's in the process of learning them. And that's what recovery groups and therapy and good materials help provide. But the bottom line is his wife is hurt, she's pulled away, and his anxiety is going through the roof. And so an anxiously attached individual will often have an extra difficult time establishing and maintaining sobriety early in the process. I didn't get my title fixed on the top of that slide. This is actually anxiously attached in active betrayal trauma, in the active DST prior to the wife knowing about the secret basement. Okay? And so, how does this play out while she is living in the wake of his IMR, his intentionally manipulated reality? Well, first, an anxiously attached wife in this situation may actually accept his IMR, his intentionally manipulated reality, due to her terror about losing the connection. it's harder for an anxious wife to look through the smoke screens and find the truth, because finding the truth is even more terrifying for her than for a dismissive in a different pathway. It's terrifying for both. So please, if you hear me, if you're one attachment style and you hear me say something and you feel like that just, wipes out your struggle there, no. You may struggle the exact same way, even though I'm describing it differently. But an anxious, a dismissive is going to struggle with it in a really painful way, because she's going to believe that it just proves that I'm not worth anything, just like I learned in my early childhood. I wasn't even valuable enough for my very own parents to want to delight in me and be with me, etc., etc. An anxious has that terror of looking at it honestly, and it impacts the pain level for her, because here it goes. I'm being rejected again, because they've had that connection and then the rejection, the connection, the rejection. It's equally painful, but my experience has been that sometimes the anxious are so terrified of finding it that even when there's real clear evidence, they work really hard not to see it. And the reason goes back to that concept of the forced choice. They are especially trapped because they have to decide, do I believe my gut? Do I believe myself? And risk losing my primary attachment. And whichever door I choose, it's going to be excruciatingly painful. And for the anxious, they very often will choose to believe the words, believe the gaslighting, believe the IMR of their partner, because the fear of losing connection is just too great. And because of that, they may agree to things, especially sexually, that they don't feel safe in out of their fear of abandonment. Sensitive thing, but it needs to be said. Pornography is not real. Pornography is full of final cuts, edits. And years ago, I spent a little bit of time reading stories from former porn stars, former women who were formerly in pornography. I don't recommend you go searching for that, because their stories can be really triggering. But one of the common threads was how many times that the women especially, sometimes the men as well, would be throwing up on set, would be over in a corner in a fetal position, would be in horrible places, would be taking cocaine, other drugs, alcohol, in order to get through the scenes. And so the images in pornography that convince a man this is what good sex is about, guess what's been cut out? The woman crying, the woman throwing up, the woman, etc., etc. But guess what viewing those images does to our brain? It creates an appetite. Things that we participate in, that we watch, that we taste, that we get a little bit of, there's things we don't like at first, and we work our way into them. And I'll play some, I'll look down my spiritual nose at most of you in this room about that very subject right now. There is no way any of you liked coffee the first day you tried it. I just do not believe it. That is the nastiest tasting stuff I've ever seen. And I'm now 59 years old and I still cannot stand a swig of it in my mouth. Okay? And yet many of you drank it and drank it and drank it to now you don't think that life can exist without it. Now, I probably overstated that. There probably are some of you who liked it from the first drink. I can't comprehend that. But I know there are many people who say, yeah, I didn't used to like coffee, but then I learned to like it and now I love it. Your sexual arousal template is similar to your taste bud template. There are things that when they are consumed, over time, create an appetite. And unfortunately for many women, many couples, pornography has created a sexual appetite for certain things that wives find painful, maybe disgusting, maybe self-abasing. But an anxious wife, especially, a lot of us got married really young. And our prefrontal cortexes weren't even fully developed. And so if you think of a young woman wanting to please her husband and terrified of his rejection, many wives gave in to things out of that fear of abandonment or that desperate desire to please that were never comfortable to them. I'm sure there are many other ways in the active stage of DST that anxiously attached women were greatly harmed. But let's move on, for time's sake, to the discovery phase. What happens for an anxiously attached wife when she opens the hatch, looks in the basement, and says, oh my, what in the world is going on down here? Okay, what happens first of all is that often she is fearful of losing the connection, and that fear and that turmoil and that trauma becomes all-consuming, and so she has struggle functioning as a mom, employee, etc. Because her primary attachment, her safe place, her safe person, she's now realizing, wait a second, he's not supporting the tightrope, he's got a pair of scissors and has cut the tightrope. What a painful thing for a wife to realize. Sometimes because of that, she has a trauma response that sometimes seems strange, but is very common. We've seen it many times. Has a trauma response of attempting to reclaim him or win him back. Yeah, many years ago I was meeting with a couple, and the husband had just recently confessed to multiple affairs. And I think the first time I met with them, they were sitting in my little office in here. And if you had a video camera on them and no sound, you would have thought they were in there for premarital counseling. They were lovey-dovey, newlyweds. She was in this place. I didn't know that there was this place at the time. I didn't have this information. Later on down the line, guess what? She was really upset. She was really hurt. She was angry, and angry at herself for going to that place. Okay? But an anxious sometimes needs physical touch and even sexual reconnection because her fear of losing the connection exceeds her pain. They're both painful. They're both excruciating. But the fear of losing the connection is even greater. Sometimes they may agree to things before she is ready, ending separations, moving back into the bedroom, resuming physical and sexual connections, etc. Because again, as an anxious, she desires, she needs that connection and needs the connection to help ease her nervous system. Sometimes she becomes angry or even rageful with herself and her spouse, but usually primarily self-raging that spills over at the other after moving towards connection and removing boundaries before she was ready. Anxious have a greater tendency to struggle with hypervigilance because their locus of control is outside of themselves. I'm okay if he's okay with me, so they're hypervigilant about where is he at? Did he see that woman? Did he notice this? Why is he not? Etc., etc. It's a terrifying place for her. Anxious sometimes experience the trauma, pushing her into hyperarousal and even disorganized attachment. Okay, again, whatever level of insecure attachment you have, when you meet trauma, you move further away from secure attachment. And so an anxiously attached, use that numerical scale that I made up that really makes no sense, but maybe it's helpful. If a wife is anxiously attached on, 20 points away from 0 securely attached, discovery trauma bumps her out to 75 or 80. And if she's already a 60 or a 70, the betrayal trauma sends her all the way out to ping any scale that could measure it. Hence why she moves into what appears to many as being disorganized attachment. And especially in this stage, I thought I had that, maybe I have it in the next point, but it certainly fits here as well. They are often mislabeled as things like borderline, out of control, etc. Because they've been pushed into disorganized attachment. And that the people working with them are not aware of and cognizant of this being a trauma response, not a personality disorder. Okay? Now let's talk about anxiously attached during ongoing recovery. Okay, once the husband has some good sobriety, he's involved, he's working, he's making progress. It's not perfection, but it's progress. Here's some struggles of the anxiously attached. 1, she's more likely to be hyper-focused on her husband's recovery progress or lack thereof. She's analyzing his schedule, his routine. She's got tracking devices on his phone, on his computer, etc., and she is hyper-vigilant. Because her very survival depends on him not going back into his addiction. In her anxiously attached, pushed further away from whatever secure attachment she may have had prior to discovery, pushes her away. Diane Poole Heller has an interesting paragraph that I'm going to read, but I want to tell you first that she was not writing this in the context of betrayal trauma. In fact, that's my only problem with her book, is I'm reluctant for people to read the book who are in this context of DST and betrayal trauma, because then you can take some of these generalizations and completely miss the fact that their level of insecure attachment had a tremendous impact by the betrayal trauma. But listen to this quote. She says, ambivalently attached, she uses ambivalent, I use anxious. Attached people may also get jealous easily. We can go into blind rages if our partner interacts with anyone else in a flirty way because we are particularly wired toward, quote, mate guarding. We are afraid that we might lose that person at any moment. The threat seems so real that we feel the need for hypervigilance and suspicion. If that describes an anxiously attached wife who's not experienced betrayal trauma, how much more so a wife who has? Hence why we have to have deep understanding and empathy for her dysregulation. Now, there's a fine line here. There's still a place where we are all responsible when we're dysregulated. And when we get dysregulated to the point that we're harming kids or someone else, we're creating an environment that is causing issues, even if we're harming the one who harmed us, there still sometimes has to be some boundaries there. But there needs to be boundaries with understanding. She's not out of control because she's a horrible person. She's not out of control because she has some psychological disorder. She's in trauma. And she needs an intensive care unit, not slapped with a borderline personality disorder label. Anxious individuals in betrayal trauma recovery struggle with the fear of losing connection, which dictates strategies for interactions, management of spouse, children, circumstances, etc. Control is huge because I've got to keep everything managed, keep the kids from being too disruptive, because if dad gets upset, then he might go back out with porn. They've got to keep all the plates spinning. They got to keep everything working perfectly, or at least that's the belief that they tell themselves. Because if I don't keep all the plates spinning and keep everything working well, then it's all going to come crashing down, and I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to be rejected, and it's a terrifying place. Even when the husband is in a time of good recovery, an anxiously attached wife may continue to struggle with disorganized attachment because of discovery and/or disclosure trauma. And then, especially in this stage, especially unfortunately, I'll go ahead and say it. I have done the full CSAT training. I greatly respect the world of the CSATs. They've got a lot of understanding, and that training was very beneficial for me. And I think the vast majority of CSATs are working really hard to help people. But unfortunately, especially in some of the CSATs who were trained prior to Stephanie Carnes beginning to do more teaching on the partners' struggle in this, there are many CSATs who are former sex addicts themselves who, when a man, he's got 6 months sobriety, he's got a year of sobriety, and so when he comes in reporting his wife is dysregulated and out of control, then he's especially liable to label her as borderline, disorganized, out of control. And unfortunately, one of the rooms in Manwala's 22-room metaphor is the room of therapeutic trauma, where therapists, counselors, pastors have added to a wife's trauma by telling her, hey, you're to blame because you're the one so out of control, no wonder he acted out. No, it's a trauma response. And we have to recognize and acknowledge that this is the reality that we created. And we need to do everything within our power to walk with her in that dysregulated place. And guys, I know this is where it gets tricky. And you can only do what you have the capacity to do. It's why you've got to be working really hard to grow your capacity, because she needs a lot more. It's also why you have to learn to have complete dependence upon God's Holy Spirit working inside of you. It's another one of those hopeless despair places. Your back is against the Red Sea, and Pharaoh and his chariots are coming your way. And the only thing you can do is cry out, God, give me what I need. And with that said, there are times that you need to remove yourself from the situation, from the physical space, clearly communicating this is a temporary removal, because her abandonment stuff's gonna just fire off as well. There are times that you have to move out of that space. But if you can maintain a calm amygdala, I heard Jim Wilder say this many years ago, and man, it's hard to do, but it does work. A person with a calm amygdala is our fear center that sends off our fight, flights responses. If a person with a calm, connected persona, with a calm amygdala, is going to naturally help a person with a dysregulated amygdala start calming down. But here's what you got to know, guys. It's calm and connected. Because if you're disconnected, even though you're calm, well, think of it as good, bad, and worst. Good is calm and connected. Bad is calm and disconnected. If you're calm and disconnected, more than likely her dysregulation is going to continue to spiral, but maybe not as fast. If you are not calm and not connected, then it's just gasoline and a match together, and that's why people often end up, somebody goes to the back of a police car. Okay? But if you can be calm and connected when your wife is dysregulated, remembering that I created this dysregulation, and tapping into the resources that I believe only God can give you the strength for, if you can stay calm and connected and hold space for her pain, powerful things can happen. And guys, I know that's hard. But I also know that it's what God is calling you towards. And you may not be at a place where you can do it yet. And if you're not, then dig in even harder in your recovery work and keep that train moving forward. Because God is calling you. He calls you and me to move away from being the predator, the one who harmed our wife, to the sacred space of becoming strong enough, of becoming dependent enough on Him that we move into being her protector, to being the one who carries the sword and doesn't fight her, but he fights the demons that are attacking her, many of which we opened the door for and brought into the house. And brothers, that is the highest calling. And yes, if we could go back in time and not open those doors and not let those things in, that would have been the absolute best thing we can do. But I've not found a way to time travel, and I don't think you have either. So now God is calling you to love your wife as Christ loved the church, and to fight for her sacrificially. And there is no higher calling, in my opinion. So now let's talk about needs. I guess I was already talking about needs, but let's talk a little more specifically. What does an anxiously attached wife need in betrayal trauma recovery? Well, the first thing she needs is synchronization. But guess what? Synchronizing to an anxiously attached wife is going to be very different than synchronizing to a dismissively attached wife. That's why cookie-cutter instructions for recovery are pretty worthless. Well, no, they're beyond worthless. They are either beneficial or very harmful. So, for example, if I have a man in my office and I give him very clear directive instructions for how to respond to his wife, and I'm talking to him from the perspective of thinking about an anxiously attached wife, and his wife turns out to be a dismissively attached wife, guess what I've just done? I've just set them both back. It's why we have to constantly be going to Jesus saying, okay, Jesus, how do I love my wounded wife today? How do I love my wounded wife today? What does she need today? Because He's the one who knows. You say, well, why don't I ask her? Well, because many times she doesn't know. Sometimes she knows and she can't tell you because that's too vulnerable. That's too risky. But guess what? Jesus knows. It's why the Emmanuel process can be so powerful for recovery. If you can learn to connect to Jesus and ask Him these questions, you're not always going to hear accurately. Sometimes you're going to think He said, buy her flowers, and you're going to bring flowers home, and she's going to look at those and say, I don't want any flowers from you. I don't want to be romantic with you. Some days you might hear from Him and you buy a single white flower and bring it home, and it melts her heart because you heard clearly from Him and He knows her heart. She needs you to synchronize with her. When she is distraught, she needs you to be there and be calm, but be with her and not go hide in the corner, not run away, not cowered away. When she wants to connect, she needs you to be available for connection. And anxiously attached wives are going to especially go on that gamut. They want to connect, and then they're terrified. And then they want to connect, and they're terrified. And guys throw up their arms and say, I don't know what to do. Like, yeah, welcome to recovery. That is the reality. And you created it. Now ask God to show you how to step into it and synchronize with her. Anxiously attached wives especially need reassurance. This quote's good. Reassurance is important for all of us, but especially for those of us who are ambivalently attached. Keep this in mind if you have an important person in your life who lives with an ambivalent adaptation. Reassurance and staying in regular contact through email, text, or phone calls calms an overactive attachment system like nothing else. Secure attachment skill number I don't remember. Maintain contact. If your wife has an anxious attachment, maintaining contact is a critical skill to learn. You say, well, I just keep forgetting. I'm not very good at it. Well, use your tools. Create alarms on your phone, on your watch, on your computer. Do whatever you need to do to help you maintain contact and provide reassurance to the one that you pulled so far away from secure attachment. She's anxious, in part, or to a great deal, because she thought she was secure until she found out you were lusting or involved with other women. So give her all the reassurance you can. Connection she needs. With an anxiously attached individual, communication oftentimes means or appears to mean over-communication. Communicate, 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 and communicate some more. Diane Poole-Heller gives the example of a couple that was struggling with this, and they figured out some, simple pre-saved text that he could send. Thinking of you. Hope you're doing well. And then he can copy and paste them because he was kind of clueless in that arena. And, some anxious wives will say, well, I don't want that. Yeah, we kind of do. It feels good to know that somebody's thinking about us because even if it is a pre-recorded message, he took the time to do it. Okay? Find what helps, what communicates, I am here for you, I'm with you, I am not going to abandon you in this place. Anxious have great need for intentional hellos and goodbyes. If you are a dismissively attached man in recovery, please use the 2-stage appreciation I taught you yesterday before you go home, so that when you walk in the door, you are in a good space to greet her. And she may appear like she doesn't want to be greeted, like she's doing other things, etc., etc. She wants your greeting. And don't leave the house without a clear goodbye, without a point of contact connection, synchronized to what feels safe and helpful to her. Give her permission to interrupt. Ouch, Darrell, you're meddling. If you are a dismissively attached individual, this one's going to be really hard for you. And again, it's a place where you're going to have to ask God for help. And it's probably also a place you're going to have to circle back to many times and apologize for. Because odds are, however old you are, you have maybe 10, 12 years less of getting really irritated at interruptions. So it's going to be really hard, and you're not going to do it well at first. But give her permission. Say, you have permission to interrupt me no matter what I'm doing. And I'm sorry, I'm probably not going to handle it well at times, but when I don't handle it well, that's on me. But don't tell her that unless you're willing to circle back at the times that you don't handle it well. And then come back to her and say, I'm sorry that I got grumpy, I reacted poorly when you interrupted me. I gave you permission to do it, and I went back on my word with that. I'm sorry, I'm going to work on it, I'm going to keep working on it, and hopefully get better at it. But it's not your fault, it was mine. I gave you permission because I know you need it, and I know you need it because of how far I knocked you off of your secure attachment grid. Can go a long ways. Anxious attachment wives are often in a greater need of physical touch. Again, we're in a tricky space here. Physical touch synchronized to where they are at in the moment of what feels safe to them. And I say in the moment, because especially early in recovery, early after D-Day, after discovery, you walk in the door from work on Monday and she may want a big hug, maybe even a kiss. You walk in the door on Tuesday and if you go near her, she might just go find a skillet to hit you with. Okay? Because it just depends on where she's at. And so you have to you have to use your adult skills of feeling the temperature in the room. And using your adult skill of using your words. Come in the door. Honey, I'm glad I'm home. It's good to see you. Where are you at? Would you like a hug or would you like me to keep distant? And then not get offended if she says, I'm not in a good place. I need you on the other side of the room. Or, I'm not in a good place. It'd be better if you went to the gym or for a run or to your buddy's house or Alaska or... I'm not saying go to Alaska, unless you're going to take me with you, but being facetious there, but the point is the same. Synchronize with her. If she wants, needs touch, give her what she needs. That may even go to the place of sexual connection. Some wives, especially anxiously attached wives in this place, want/need sexual reconnection to know that the relationship is okay. And I encourage my guys in that to be very careful, be very slow, ask for permission at every stage, and give her permission to stop the process at any point of the process. And be prepared that she may want that today, and then she could be furious about it tomorrow. And that's not because she's crazy. It's because she's in trauma. And she's a trauma victim. And God calls us to love her where she's at. It also calls you to be honest about where you're at. Can you handle sexual reconnection at your stage of recovery? Because if reconnecting with her sexually is going to lead you in a place that is going to cause you to lose your sobriety or act out because it starts processes going that you don't have the skills yet to manage, because you're still in that stage where total abstinence is manageable, but the sporadic here or there isn't, you have to be honest with where you're at. And if that's the case and you're not in the place that you can actually be with her, then you need to be honest and communicate that. And trust her to God in that place. The sexual relationship, I believe, must always be a safety switch and never a three-way switch. Okay? Some of you know what I'm saying here. Some of you are going, what in the world is that talking about? Okay? Debbie and I first got married, well, not when we first married. We bought our first house in 95, Roswell, New Mexico. And we took a wall out in the kitchen and made the kitchen dining room kind of one big room, created a new entrance into the garage on the other end. And so I put a light switch at the new door coming in from the garage. Well, so you also needed a light switch on the other side of the room, so when you were coming from the bedrooms or the living room, you could turn on the light from either end. That's a three-way switch. And three-way switches, when they're wired correctly, no matter what the light is, when you flip the switch, it does the opposite. So if the lights are on and you flip the switch up, they go off because you flipped the switch. I don't know how that magic works. Find an electrician to explain it to you, okay? So I looked at diagrams, I got the instructions on the switches, and I installed the switch, and they worked. I could turn on the light at one end of the room, turn it off, and the lights go off. Turn it on, off, works great. Turned it on, went to the other end of the room, and I turned it off, and on, and it worked great. So I thought I was done. And I don't remember exactly when, maybe it was the next day, Debbie calls me and says, hey, the lights don't work in the kitchen. I'm like, what do you mean the lights don't work in the kitchen? They worked fine yesterday. Back in my mind, I'm thinking, what'd you do? What'd you break? Okay? Or, no, she's a smart woman. She can use a light switch. I'm like, what in the world? So I get home and I start looking into it. And I go and I flip the switch, and sure enough, they don't work. And I go back and forth, and then all of a sudden they work. I'm like, why is it working? And then finally, after some deduction, I realize that when both switches were on, the lights worked. When either switch was off, the lights didn't work. See where I'm going? Sex between a husband and wife needs to operate on a safety switch principle. If it is not good for either one, it is not good for the relationship. It can be very good when both husband and wife are in a good place and are able to be together that way. And with an anxiously attached wife in betrayal trauma recovery, it's important to acknowledge her need. And if you're not in a place for that, you need to be able to affirm that it's okay that you have that need. I want to be there with you. I'm really sorry that I'm not in that place right now. Same point I'll circle back to that I had for the wife needs in dismissive attachment. Husbands, guys, she needs you to focus on your IABs, your integrity abuse behaviors. Sobriety is not enough. Especially if you are a dismissive husband and your wife is anxious. When you hear that voice in the back of your head that says, I don't know what more she wants, I've been sober for blah, 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 blah.
Talk to that with your brother. Your brother's in recovery. That's not what she needs to hear. What she needs you to do is to make your integrity abuse behaviors, your deceptions, your denials, your minimizations, your justifications, your blame shifting, your the whole list. She needs you to focus on those, and as I said in the previous session, be in community where you are checking in on your IABs daily would be best. And at the bare minimum, multiple 3, 4, 5 times a week. Because what brings change is consistent, focused attention. And guys, I cannot beat this drum loud enough, hard enough, long enough. The most damage we do is not in losing our sobriety. But in deception, in gaslighting, in minimizing, in justifying, and doing those behaviors that our male entitlement especially makes us incredibly prone to commit against her. It's why good community is essential. And it's why all of you have no excuse. And what I mean by that is, you know that at New Hope, you have the opportunity to be here once or twice a week in person to do this. And then by the magic of Zoom, you have the opportunity 7 days a week to get on the Zoom check-in and check in with brothers about your IABs. And you say, well, Zoom's really hard for me and I don't feel as connected. No, you're not going to feel as connected because they're on a computer screen. However, some of you guys who've flown in and come here from out of town, guess what Zoom's going to be for you now with some of the guys you've met here in person? It's now going to be more connected than it used to be because now you've been physically in a space with them. You survived Darrell's root canal without Novocaine together. And so you have a greater bond with them. But here's what I tell guys all the time. What you get out of those Zoom check-ins isn't as much what you hear from the other guys, though that can be beneficial. The most important thing you get out of them is what you put out on the table. And by you being vulnerable, by you being open, by you being transparent, you're doing what John described about walking in the light. And when you walk in the light, you have fellowship with one another, and the blood of his Son, Jesus, purifies us of all unrighteousness. Guys, IABs are unrighteous. And we need Jesus to skim the top of that and remove them from us. And that's where confession and transparency and being in the brotherhood of men can make an incredible difference. And I'm calling you to it. And many of you know your wife's just heard me call you to it. And I hope that ramps up the motivation. Because she needs you to step into this place. And you need you to step into this place. Because deep in your DNA, you are an image bearer. You are created in the image of God. And he fights for the weak and the oppressed and the vulnerable. And whenever I talk to men, I can just feel their hearts come alive when they start thinking about themselves being the protector. And God is calling you today, right now, to step even more into that good warrior protector that he created you to be as a reflection of his glory. Let's pray. Jesus is hard stuff. I've been working on this material for a long time, and I knew it was hard. But just going through it, I'm reminded that it's even harder than I was thinking it would be. And I confess there's part of me that is fearful that I pushed people too far. And so, Lord, I just trust you. I trust your safety net. I trust that you will provide each person here today exactly what they need. whether it be through a friend, whether it be through a therapist, whether it be to their support group, whether it be to you just supernaturally meeting them in the painful place that they're at. I just trust that you are here, Lord, and that you are doing a mighty work today. And I do ask going forward that you give us the courage to move forward. I pray for all the anxious, attached individuals today, that they find the courage to be alone and wait long enough for you to discover you meeting them there in those places of terror, and that you are enough. And I pray for all the dismissively attached individuals. And I pray for their terror of moving forward, of engagement. And I pray that they would find the courage to trust you and to peek out from their shell and to risk being vulnerable, knowing that they're going to be hurt and it's going to be painful, but also knowing, Lord, that you use all our wounds and you redeem everything. And so I pray you give us the courage to trust. And Lord, I lift up a special prayer for the disorganized and those who suffered so greatly in childhood or suffered so greatly through traumas, even as an adult, that they're not able to stay in any kind of secure attachment, and that they struggle with both extremes of insecure attachment. And I pray, Lord, that you would just speak your heart of love and compassion for them, to them. And Lord, I've seen through the years, oftentimes the disorganized people I work with, Lord, sometimes have the greatest ability to connect with you. And I can't help but believe that that's just your grace. And that's how you help them move through life and find the healing and transformation and restoration that they long for and that they need. And so, Lord, if there's anybody here who is struggling because they feel like they've been left out and their needs haven't been met today and yesterday, because I just pray for protection against the enemy's lies, that they're too screwed up, they're too far gone, they're beyond hope. And I pray, Lord, that you would help them know that you raised the dead, you calm the sea. You've done unbelievable miracles throughout all history and eternity, and that you were able to heal and restore and walk through the journey of painful restoration with anyone who is willing to turn and trust you. So, Jesus, we just thank you for being a God who heals, who redeems, and who restores. And it's in Jesus' name we pray.